Welcome, learning about Attack Vector Tactical Part 2. Power, Heat, Lasers, and Damage. I'm Mike Zekum, and I'll be your instructor today. If you haven't watched Part 1, I highly recommend watching Part 1 first, as we're not duplicating information. Now, before we begin, this is not a comprehensive course of lessons. There's no way to go over every single nook and cranny of the rule set, so this is just enough to get you started. So when you pick up the rule book, it makes sense. You can go forward and learn on your own. However, the best way to learn is to play and make mistakes. So yeah, just break out the game board or fire up the virtual map online and start playing. And finally, this is not authoritative. Don't use these videos as the basis for any argument over rules. Just check the rule book, go to the Facebook group, ask questions there, join the Discord, ask questions there, and we'll get you the actual authoritative answers because, hey, I'm human, I make mistakes too. The concepts we'll be covering today is power, heat, reactors, and damage. And under damage, there's a lot of subcategories like damage locations, damage pools, hull depth, armor, and the ever so popular soak roll. First up is power. One power point in attack vector is 1 gigajoule of energy in the real world. This power is used to power weapons and defenses. Auxiliary systems such as computers, life support, etc. are well below the scale of the game. For example, if you look at the power usage of the International Space Station today, it consumes a little under 8 gigajoules of power per day. So converting that to attack vector turns, the entire International Space Station level of power usage will consume 1 point of power every 84 turns, or 672 segments. So it really is not worth tracking the power usage of things like life support or computer systems. Just think in mind how much energy is actually being used by life support versus the weapons next time someone in the TV show says, no, divert power from life support to shields or to weapons. It's like, it's not a lot of power, dude. However, back to attack vector. All the power is stored in a series of batteries, and that basically serves as a limiter to how much power is available at any one given time. Batteries are refilled over time by reactors, and finally, if a battery is full when it's destroyed, it tends to blow up and do even more damage. We're not going to really cover explosions in today's lesson, just look it up in the rulebook. It's pretty easy to pick up after that. The next concept we're going to talk about today is heat. One heat point in the game is 33 gigajoules of waste heat in the real world, so it's pretty damn hot. Heat is generated by the fusion reactors. Everything else on the ships are pretty much below the scale of the game. For example, for the crew to generate 1 heat point per turn, a ship would need a crew of 2.6 million people. So given the crew complement of a Wasp in the game, which is 72 people, they'll generate 1 heat point every 36,000 turns. So yeah, heat from individuals, not that big of a deal. Heat is normally radiated. Remember, in space, the only way you can get rid of heat is to radiate it, because there's nothing to convect or conduct the heat away from the spaceship. And so those big solar panel looking things on the ships, those aren't solar panels, those are radiators sending heat out into space. However, they're extremely fragile, so during combat, they're retracted and stored in armor housings during combat. Because not only can't they take a hit, they really can't withstand the combat levels of thrust and pivoting that occurs during combat. So a very common thing in the 10 world setting is to strike the colors, or no, signal your surrenders to extend out the radiators. It's a very clear signal that you give up, because once they're extended, it's pretty suicidal to try to restart combat. So instead of radiating the heat into space, the heat is stored into heat sinks, which is basically big tubs of, I believe, sodium that will absorb the heat. And yeah, if they get damaged, they'll, like batteries, they'll also explode. I mean, just think, you have this canister containing 33 gigajoules of heat energy. It blows up. That energy has to go somewhere. It's painful. But heat sinks also serve as the ultimate timer in the game. Once your heat sinks are full, there's not much more you can do in the game. Reactors are what generate power and heat in the game. They are turned on and off on turn breaks, that's once every 8 segments, as we covered last session. The amount of power and heat that a reactor generates is based on its size, which is set by the game designers, and the players can't change it all. Just keep that in mind when you look at the various ship sheets, going, this ship is reactor size 4, this one has 3 reactor size 3. I wonder why that is. There's in-universe reasons for that. Regardless, every reactor, if it generates X power per segment, it produces X heat per turn. So if it generates 1 power per segment, it'll generate 1 heat per turn. If it generates 2 power per segment, it'll generate 2 heat per turn. It's not scalable. It's either on or off. As I mentioned earlier, some ships have multiple reactors that allow scaling of energy production, because they could also then control their heat production as well. There are multiple types of reactors in the game. We're just focusing on the fusion reactor today, as it is the most common. The other types of reactors are listed in the rulebook. Just feel free to read those. The main weapon we're covering today are the lasers, as it's the main direct fire weapon in the 10 world setting. There are 2 main types of lasers. There's a short range and medium range. Hence, short range laser system, or SRLS, and medium range laser systems, or MRLS. Now, all lasers follow the same sort of format in terms of their naming. First, the size of the laser, followed by the type, followed by how much power they use when they're fired, and their cooldown. Cooldown determines how fast the laser can fire. So if we fire this particular laser here, which is a size 2 medium range laser system, it takes 2 power, has a cooldown of +3. That +3 means if you fire in segment 1, you can fire it again on segment 4, and then again on segment 7, and then on the next turn, it'll be segment 2, then 5, then 8, and so on. Each time it shoots, it takes 2 points of power. Usage is fairly straightforward. First, you determine the range of the target. Then you take the power, which in this case is 2, subtract it from the batteries. Then you roll a d10, and you cross-reference on the chart. This is the chart for the size 2 medium-range laser system. As a little reminder here that it costs 2 power, has 3 cooldown. So if I'm shooting a target at range 12 and I roll a 6, so here's the 10 to 12 range, roll a 6, so the 2 is the answer for how much damage is done. These numbers up here with the D's, we can ignore. They're basically treated as a 0 when they shoot a ship. They're used for shooting incoming projectiles, which we'll cover next session. So after you use the chart to find out how much damage you do, you then note the cooldown on a piece of paper, or if you're using the virtual map, we have a little notebook item you can use, so you know when you can fire that weapon again. So shooting lasers, pretty simple and straightforward. Now the complex part, applying the damage. The damage allocation system in attack vector is kind of, what's the correct word? Verbose, but also adds a tremendous amount of variability every time you fire the laser. Sometimes you do minimum damage, other times you do far more damage than you thought possible. So the concepts, we're going to talk about damage locations. There's actually 8 different damage locations on each ship. Damage pools, which is how much damage you do in a single hit. Hull depth, which is determines how the damage is allocated. And then concepts like defenses, we have armor. We have the surface armor of the ship and the internal armor inside of the ship. The soak roll, which is the main mechanism for determining how the damage is applied. And to start things off, you need to point out that 1 point of damage is 50 megajoules of energy applied over 8 centimeter circle. That is the equivalent of 12.5 kilograms of dynamite So that gives you a frame of reference. Okay, so hit locations. There are 6 hit locations that are on the outside of the ship. They're the nose, aft, port, starboard, top, and bottom sides. Inside of the ship, past the surface layers, we have the core, and there's one special zone called propulsion. That's actually the mast that has the big fusion engine on the back of the ship. It's so far back, it's its own separate zone that you actually need special targeting rules to even shoot at. So we're not going to be covering that today. Each zone, as you can tell by the hit charts down here, has different items that you can damage within it. So if you shoot like the top zone, you could potentially damage the bridge, crew quarters, batteries, cargo, heat sinks, the radiator, as also the fuel tanks. Whereas if you shot the port section, you just hit cargo, reactors, batteries, and fuel. So the zone in which you attack your opponent will determine what you actually damage on their ship. All these damage charts are unique for each ship and are located on the bottom of each ship's SSD. Mapping from the Avid and the ARC's globe to the actual zones is actually handled by the Avid Assistant, and once we get into the app, we'll show you where to look that up. Next up is damage pools and hull depth. The damage pool is simply the total amount of damage in a single hit. For like lasers, it's like one laser shot, that's your damage pool. There are ways to combine multiple weapons to form a single damage pool so you can punch through thicker armor. But that will be covered more next session. The ships we're flying today only have one laser, so there's no way to combine multiple weapons together. Hull depth. Each hit location zone, you can only do a limited amount of damage to that zone, and then all remaining damage will transition to the next zone in the list. And typically you go from a surface zone to the core to the opposite side surface zone, then any damage after that is simply lost. So for our ships today, our hull depth when you hit the nose or the aft is 16, and when you shoot from the sides, it is 8. As you can see by these charts down here, it hopefully shows what's going on. So this shot being shot from the top, so the top zone will absorb 8 points of damage. Any remaining damage will transfer to the core. As it's being shot this way, it will absorb 8 points of damage. Any remaining damage goes to the bottom zone, where it will absorb 8 points of damage. Then any damage left over after that is simply lost into space. Now, if the same ship was shot from the front, it has to go through a much longer distance, and the hull depth is doubled. So it's 16 for the nose, then 16 for the core, then 16 for the aft. Armor. Armor protects the ships. It's the primary defense. On the surface, there are 30 different zones, and we'll show those a bit more later when you get to the SSDs. And there's also armor on the inside. On hit location charts, it actually shows the armor for each hit location. And for this ship, it's a lot of zeros, except for the core, we have a lot of 3s and 2s. So yeah, it's simply these little gray boxes with white numbers. That's the internal armor for each item. Soak rolls. Soak rolls is what reduces the damage pool. Blowing stuff up does not reduce the damage pool, only the soak rolls do. This is what gives us a lot of variability in how damage is applied to a ship. So a soak roll is simply the armor, either the surface armor or the internal armor of the item being hit, plus a 2d10 minus roll. 2d10 minus is a standard dice rolling convention for Astra Games. It simply take 2 10-sided dice, roll them, and take the difference. So it generates a value from 0 to 9, with 0 being the most common and 9 being the least common. That 0 bit is important because if you roll a 0 on your soak roll, it will also cause a structural integrity hit as well. Structural integrity is what causes ships to blow up, so avoiding zeros on soak rolls is important, which is also why when I play, my ships blow up a lot because I tend to roll a lot of zeros. Once the damage pool is reduced by the hull depth, damage moves to the next zone. And we'll see a big example of that coming up in a second. Surface areas with 0 armor do not get soak rolls. However, internal hit locations with 0 armor do get soak rolls. The defender makes all the soak rolls, and you'll see why in a second. If you hit a mount, as you will see on the SSD a bit later, mounts also have armor listed. That's only for mount sniping, which is an advanced rule that we're not going to cover. Mounts use the armor listed in the internal hit table. The damage procedure. So, with all those concepts in mind, first thing we do is we calculate our damage pool. After we calculate the damage pool, we then make a soak roll for the surface armor, and we reduce the damage pool. Then, using the first hit location that we're hitting, the attacker rolls to see what's destroyed. The defender then makes the soak roll for that item. The damage pool is reduced by the amount soaked. If there's 0 or more points left in the damage pool, the item is destroyed. And again, destroyed items can still soak damage. It's called bouncing the rubble in the game. So if you blow up all the reactor boxes, you get another reactor hit. It still counts as being there because there's still stuff there to absorb the damage. Once the damage pool is reduced by the hull depth, damage moves to the next hit location. Otherwise, you go back to step 3 and just rinse and repeat. Again, we have a large example of this coming up momentarily. So the key things to remember, hull depth refers to the damage pool being reduced and not the number of boxes being destroyed. So with our hull depth of 8, it means our damage pool has been reduced by 8, not 8 boxes have been destroyed. Thanks to the ability to roll zeros and SI hits, and items having 0 armor, you can destroy an infinite number of boxes and not reduce the damage pool. Of course, rolling all the zeros will mark off the SI track, and your ship will eventually go boom anyways, but yeah. Now, these next 2 items are very important. The attacker rolls the hit location, keeps track of the damage pool, and hull depth. So that's their job during the damage allocation procedure. The defender, they do the soak rolls. They call out the amount of damage soaked, and then mark off the damage on the ship sheet. So it's like I said, it's a very intense procedure. So both players need to cooperate and keep the cadence moving. Okay, now for an example. So our ship just got hit on the port side for 38 points of damage. This could have been a laser or a combination of lasers. It doesn't matter. We got hit for 38 points of damage. It hit us port side, 1 towards the nose, where we have 1 point of surface armor. Our hull depth is 8. So we'll be showing on this side over here, the attacker and defender call and response, and over here will be our math. So the first thing the attacker does is call out 38 damage, port side, 1 towards the nose, as that is the zone that he hit on the ship sheet. That has 1 point of armor. The defender then rolls. All the results will be in the parentheses here. So they rolled a 3, they add in the 1 armor, get a total of 4. So the soak roll is 4. So they call out soak 4. So now our damage pool is reduced to 34. Our hull depth is 8, so once we get down to 26 points of damage or less, we'll move to the core. Over here is the chart for the port side. So as the attacker rolls the various hit locations, you can see what comes up. So the attacker rolls, and he calls out 34 damage, location 2, because they rolled a 2. So the defender will go over here, sees location 2 is cargo, it has 0 armor. So they roll, they got a 2, so they soaked 2 points, so they would call back, soak 2. The damage pool is reduced to 32, and The attacker rolls the next location and calls out 32 damage, location 1. Which we see over here is the cargo. Defender rolls, they get a 0. So they call out soak 0 plus SI, because they took an SI hit. This does not reduce the damage pool, so the attacker rolls a new hit location and calls out 32 damage, location 5, which is a reactor, which has 0 armor. The defender rolls, gets a 2 again, and calls out soak 2. This reduces the damage pool down to 30, and the attacker rolls a new location and calls out 30 damage, location 8. Location 8 is the batteries. So the defender rolled a 4. He'll call out soak 4. And most likely the battery had energy in it, which will be taken care of later as an explosion. That's outside of today's lesson. Damage pool is reduced to 26, which is equivalent to the threshold. So now the damage moves to the core. Our new threshold is 18, as 26 minus 8 is 18. And so the attacker calls out 26 damage, core, because we've now moved to the core, location 3, which we see over here is the bridge that has 2 armor. The defender rolled a 1, their total is 3. So they call out soak 3. Damage pool is reduced to 23. The attacker rolls a new location and calls out 23 damage, location 2. See, location 2 has life support. It has 3 armor. So our defender rolled a 1 for a total of 4. So they'll call out soak 4. This reduces the damage pool to 19. It's still above our threshold. The attacker rolls again and calls out 19 damage, location 10, which you can see here is 0 armor. And our defender rolled an 8, so 0 plus 8 is 8. So they call out soak 8, and they mark off the SI hit from the hit location. So even though we've exceeded our threshold for the core, we still mark off the item in the core. This takes our damage pool down to 11, which is less than or equal to the threshold. So now all remaining damage moves to the starboard side. Our new threshold is 3. So the attacker calls out 11 damage starboard as we change locations. Location 8. As you hear, that's the batteries with 0 armor. So the defender rolls a 3. So 0 plus 3 is 3. So they call out soak 3, which reduces damage pool to 8. The attacker calls out 8 damage, location 2, which is reactors, which has 0 armor. We roll, get a 6. So our total is 6. So we call out soak 6. This reduces our damage pool down to 2, which is less than or equal to our threshold. So all remaining damage is lost. So the attacker calls out done, and we are done with our damage allocation. So in this example, we marked off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 regular boxes, and 1 additional structural integrity for this roll of 0 up here. So that's a total of 10 boxes. Not bad for a 38-point hit that blew through the ship. As you can see here, even though we had a hull depth of 8, and both the starboard and port side had 0 armor for everything, we did twice as many boxes of damage to the port side as to the starboard side, simply based on how much we were able to soak with the rolls. So that's where you get a lot of variability. Now, if we rolled soak 9 up here right away, we would just have taken 1 box of damage and transition to the core. Now let's talk about some best practices. As you can tell, this can take some time to do. However, there are no decisions, it's pure mechanics. Unlike the other Astra Games Squadron Strike, which has the hull substitution as an option for every single hit, you do not have that option in Attack Vector. What the damage is what the damage is. There are no ways to mitigate it. So with that in mind, the best practices are, first of all, don't worry about the consequences while marking off damage. You can always look stuff up afterwards. Just get through the damage allocation, because If you're like me and roll a lot of zeros, ship's going to blow up anyways. So just mark off the damage and come back to the consequences later. This one's for the attacker. Use paper to tally the damage to avoid mistakes. So just grab a piece of scrap paper, a notepad on a computer, just make sure you have things written down. Note the thresholds every time you enter into a new zone. As you can tell from the example previously, every time I entered into a new zone, I calculated a new threshold. That's because subtraction is harder than addition for the human mind. It's just a thing. And trying to go, okay, my damage pools are reduced by 5, and the amount of damage done in the zone has been increased by 5. Is 5 greater than 8? That becomes very cumbersome, so just write down the threshold so you know that, oh, when I get to this level or less, to go to the next zone. Stick with the call response method. Calling out 12 damage, location 5, and with the defender responding soak 4, everyone gets all the information they need to actually do what they need to do to keep the process moving. Don't go, okay, I hit location 5, which is a reactor. You have 0 armor. That just slows things down. The defender can easily look stuff up on their own sheet just as fast as the attacker. And as the call response method kind of pointed out, don't ask about what was hit. Because again, worry about that after you've allocated the damage. The one exception is the SI hit. We roll zeros because that's exciting and could actually lead to damage allocation being cut short if a ship blows up. Now that we have the preliminary stuff out of the way, now to get to the practicalities of the actual Avid Assistant software and virtual map. We won't be going over most of the interface as we covered that in the last session, so we're just going over new stuff today. First up is the Notepad item. The Notepad is this collapsible window right here. With it, you can take notes. So once you logged into a game, to create a notebook, you just go click on this wrench icon, and then you either choose an existing notebook if one exists, which there shouldn't be right now, or you create a new one. Just give it a name. And click create, and it'll create a notebook with your name on it. The reason for this is we do not have login accounts for the Avid Assistant and Virtual Map, so we have to kind of do this janky way to create notebooks. Once it's created, we have a notebook of just one page. Just start typing in random stuff here. Want to create more pages, just click on the wrench icon, modify notebook. You can add a new page before or after the current page. You can move pages around or delete a page. So we'll add in a couple pages for later. Now the last thing is this lock icon. The Notepad item is built on web technology. So if you type something in, you want to highlight it, as you can see, it will move the entire notepad around. So to prevent that, we just lock it into place. Now, if we drag stuff around, the highlight, it won't drag the entire notebook. We iconize it, we could then just drag it, uniconize it, and it'll be locked into place as well. We just put that right here for now, as we cover the rest of the interface. The die roller is next. That is on the tab called Dice. At the bottom here is a whole bunch of buttons to roll dice. Everything from 2d10 plus, which rolls 2 10-sided dice and adds them together. The 2d10 minus roll we talked about earlier. Straight up d10. Space, if you click it, will just add a blue bar so you can separate out dice rolls. So let's add a couple rolls here. And then a spacer, so you can divide them up more easily. Soak roll is for the soak roll, which you talked about earlier, just labeled it soak. It's a 2d10 minus roll. And hit is kind of special. Some people like doing everything with one die roll. So it rolls the hit location, any secondary location in case you hit a mount, and the soak roll all with one roll. It's not the typically way you play, but some people prefer that over the call response of attacker defender. And then finally we have, you can roll up to 20 dice with a target number, and it'll tell you how many successes you got. Not really used in attack vector all that much. Over here we have the type of roll and the attacker and defender. That's pulled from usually the Arcs tab or Avid tab, whichever's up. And I only have one ship right now, purple. But you can select your target, and then when you roll, depending on what your roll is, a hit will list the defender. That's what those columns are for, and results will just break it down. The numbers inside the square brackets are the actual numbers on the dice. So for the soak roll, the actual numbers were 3 and 6. For this 2d10 plus roll, the actual numbers were 1 and 4. Now we're going to look at a bit more of the SSD page. The SSD page is obviously, again, selected on the SSD tab. So first thing, where's our zoom? There it is. We'll zoom in a little bit and move this over. So all of these numbers here in the silhouette, those are your surface armor zones. So this is the nose. Right here on the nose, you have 2 armor. One window off of that, you have armor 1, 1, 1, and 1, and so on. These zones right here on the starboard and port side, all these have lovely 0 armor. And the aft also has a whole bunch of 0 armor. So that's where you find the surface armor on the silhouette. Up here are the firing arcs. So this right here is the firing arc for the size 2 medium range laser systems that we talked about earlier. And underneath here, you see there's like 2 boxes. That means this weapon can take 2 points of damage before it's destroyed. Over here on the side, we talked about thrust in the last session. These are the 2 reactors for the ship. So we turn on reactors on or off. We have 2 choices. We can turn just 1 reactor on or 2 reactors on. So generate 1 energy a segment or 2 energy a segment, and 1 heat per turn or 2 heat per turn, or obviously we could turn it all off. The structural integrity track is right here. As we take damage on that, we just mark it off. The numbers in the octagons, yeah, they look like circles. Hit one of those, you have to roll that number or higher in order for your ship to live. Batteries is right here, and heat sinks are right here. The highest unmarked battery heat sink is the current capacity. So we have 16 energy max, and we can absorb up to 12 heat. These 2 charts right here, kinetic weapon damage and the laser chart, these are actually copied with permission from Astra Games to this ship sheet from weapon card number 1. So we don't have to swap over to weapon card number 1 during these demos. Down here on the bottom are the hit locations we talked about earlier. We have nose, aft, port, etc. Our hull depth is found right here. And as last time, our fuel is over here. Down here at the bottom is also a die roller. So you don't have to swap between these 2 pages to see the dice rolls. All the results will still appear on the dice tab though. So if you're doing like soak rolls, you can just select soak, click it here, and it'll tell you the result. That way you can stay on this page and not have to switch back and forth. Down here is the attacker and target toggle. So right now, attacker, that is me. It is the ship in the attacker bar over here. We switch it to target. It is whatever is in this target bar down here. And this is our target for today. These are the gumdrops. As you can see, they have 5 armor all over the place, except on the bottom. And they also have very simplified hit locations. I just created these quickly for demo purposes, so they're not actually part of the real game. On the ARCs page is where we see all of our targeting information. To get the ARCs page, just go to the Avid Assistant. Let's move this out of the way. And select ARCs. This is the fishbowl diagram, or ARCs firing ARCs diagram, and is exactly the same as this diagram right here. So for example, I see red 1, which is a gumdrop, directly on my nose. So I can shoot at it with my size 2 medium range laser system as it's right there in the middle. It has the same color coding as the Avid. Red is where it's at right now. Green is where it will be next segment. Blue is 8 segments from now. Down here at the bottom, we can select different weapon types. Currently, for this session, we're only using beams. If you see anything else over here that says segments and rate of closure, those are seeking weapons. That's for next session. Also down here at the bottom is this armor diagram button. You select it, and it'll show you where you'll be hitting your target. That way we know which armor zone to map to. So if I shoot red gumdrop number 1, I see it on the nose, 1 to the left. So that'll be this section right here with 5 armor. That's a blue simulator, red simulator. Trying to find, there we go. There's actually a selection of 2 different zones it could possibly hit because it's right on the line. So in this case, I can shoot the 5 armor right here or the 4 armor right here. The same thing for this one, and so on. If you click this button again, it'll go to the exact same thing except for cylinder ships. Click it again to go back to the ARCs. This button right here will bring the data pop-up so you can actually command when you're going to be shooting your weapons. We'll be seeing more of this in the near future. But if you want to say, hey, I'm going to shoot my lasers this turn, doing the right order step, you just go here, click beams. That's all it is. Filters will cover more next session, as well as this button over here, which is the Shell Star button. That's for seeking weapons. Next up is the data pop-up. Much like with movement grid, the data pop-up you access by selecting the name of your ship in the bars up top. So my currently selected ship is purple, so I click that. It'll bring up the data pop-up. Data pop-up, if you go this way, is the movement grid we covered last time, as well as the attitude pop-up. This right here is the power pop-up. And one more is the order pop-up. And this is where we spend our power. So we have a couple sections. We have heat, which will accumulate automatically as we gain heat. The buttons here are to adjust in case you make a mistake. Power, these 2 buttons right here are the most commonly used ones. As you spend power, you just decrease it. Reactors we'll be using to turn on or off reactors, and also to make any adjustments during the turn if you take damage. Because remember, reactors are only turned on or off during a turn break, but if they take damage during the turn, their output might be lowered. Their heat's never lowered, just the power output. So we'll turn our 2 reactors on, so we will generate 2 power a segment. One nifty thing, when you're generating power with reactors, you can spend it ahead of time. So our power can go all the way down to -2 as we have 2 reactors on, because at the end of the segment, we'll gain those 2 points of power, take us back up to 0. Now we're going to run through a turn so you can see how this will play out. For demo number 2, the general idea is that each ship will first go after its own gumdrop. Once that gumdrop takes some damage, it's then free to hunt down other ships. So my ship right here is the purple ship, and that is my assigned gumdrop. Once I damage that gumdrop, I can then start hunting down other ships. This gumdrop, if you recall from the SSD, is heavily armored. So I have to fly first underneath it, and then point my laser straight up to hit this section right here in the middle, which is 0 armor. Because otherwise, my laser, I have 1, has a maximum damage of 5 at range 0 to 9. So I will not be able to penetrate the armor from anywhere else except from the bottom side. So I'm going to fast forward as I fly, it'll pitch down, fly underneath it, and then face up. Okay, we have hit our turn break. We've gone through 1 complete turn. And I'm not quite in firing arc yet. I have my path so that 8 segments from now I'll be directly underneath it. As I look at the arcs, currently right now I am hitting the side where I have no chance of getting through the armor. But I'm in a pretty good range. So I'll be hitting right there. Need to get a little bit further down. Actually, I need to hit there in order to get to the bottom side. And I'm currently hitting here. So it's getting close. So the trick is, do I turn on my reactors? The cooldown for my weapon is 3 segments. So in a single turn, I could spend upwards to 6 energy to shoot. My batteries are at 16, so I have plenty of juice in the batteries for a complete turn of shooting. Let's assume I shoot by segment 2, because I can shoot in segment 2, 5, and 8. So up to 3 times in a turn. So I'll just fast forward until I actually get into a shooting position. But this is one of the main decision points for this tutorial is when to turn on the reactors. All right, we have got to know where we want to be on the bottom in one of the arcs where the armor is not 5. So it's 3 points of armor around the center. I could spend one flex point to do something called an aim shift, so I'll hit the center, but I'll just do a regular shot for now, and in 3 segments I'll have another shot. So to designate how to do this, first open up your notebook and get rid of all this. So looking at our SSD, our laser is in mount A, so I usually do mount A, and it's the first one, since most mounts have multiple lasers in them. Sorry, I do A-1 or A1. I am shooting at purple 1, and my cooldown is 3 segments. It is currently turn 2, segment 3. 3 segments from now will be turn 3, segment 2, so I denote that as 3/2. And it costs me 2 power. So with all that written down, I move this out of the way, go to the ARCs tab, click on my ship name up here, go to the orders tab. Alternately, I can just click this button down here. That looks like the hamburger button. It'll take me directly to the orders tab. I click beam, and that way it'll put me into the turn order for firing a beam. And that's all there is. Now, when we advance to fire orders, it says, hey, step 10 in the fire orders, which is fire beam weapons, I'm up, and I get to shoot. So clicking that brings me to the purple simulator ship. Double check my arcs. Yeah, right smack dab on the nose. Is at range 2. So range 2 for this laser is this column right here. So I'll roll a d10. I can either do it on the dice tab here, and this thing gets in the way a lot, or I can just roll it right here on the SSD tab. So I'll roll a d10 on here, and I rolled a 6. A 6, cross-reference here, says I did 5 points of damage. So I would tell my opponent, hit, aft, one towards the left, 5 points. And then my opponent, which I have sitting on a different screen, would then select that and do a soak roll. So this is a purple 1 for a soak roll. So go to the dice tab here, hit the spacer so you can see, and they do a soak. Oh, 0. Excellent. So back to the SSD, I'll bring up him. Since he soaked 0, actually he soaks 3 plus an SI. So my damage pool drops down to 2 points. You can also keep track of that here. So we did 5. He soaked 3. We're now down to 2 points. However, he also took an SI hit, which he marks right there. So he has to roll 4 or better in order to live on a d10. And if we check over here, he rolled a 10. So he lives. However, he has 2 points going into his bottom. For this gumdrop, we simplified all sides except the core. We have a hull depth of 5, so we're never going to actually hit the core. With these ships anyways. So first thing I do is I roll, I have 2 points. First I roll a hit location. So that's a d10. I go 2 points to the 7. And we'll switch over to the dice tab so you can see the results. So he rolls up. That's now a soak roll. Soak roll. Ooh. So he soaks 1 because his armor is 1. So he says soak 1 SI. So my damage pool is now reduced down to a 1, and he takes an additional SI hit. You can see why I tend to blow up quickly, because I roll a lot of zeros. So we're going to put a spacer here. Since he has another SI hit, he has to roll 5 or better in order to live. He rolls an 8, so he still lives. That's because he's marking off the SI hits right here. And I have 1 point left, so I roll a new hit location. 1 point to the 2. So he would then do another soak roll. And he rolled a 2. So we say soak 3. There's 2 for the roll, plus 1 for the armor. That's what these numbers recall are right here. So he took a total of 3. So since he soaked more than was coming in, he doesn't mark anything off, even though it's nothing. And I'm at negative 2 points. So I say all done. I also go in here and reduce my power by 2, as that was the cost of the laser to fire. And that's all there is. So now we'll fast forward 3 to the end of the turn. As my cooldown for the weapon, I just go in here and just go like that. I will not be able to fire it until 3-2. We have hit a turn break. So what I'm going to do here is I want to turn on my reactors. You recall I have 2 reactors. I'm going to turn one of them on. So down here I go reactor. I will generate 1 point of power and 1 point of heat. That's all you need to do. Now, during the regeneration step, this number up here will automatically go up by 1 point, and at the end of the turn, he will automatically go up by 1 point as well. So now we'll fast forward a bit. So here we are on turn 3, segment 2. My lasers are now off of cooldown. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm just going to space it out. I'll be shooting purple 1 again. And it'll still be 2 points of power. And if we look on our arcs page, we have range 3 right on the nose, hitting smack dab on the bottom, which, if you recall, has 0 armor. So I'll be able to shoot this fairly easily. If we look at our power, we see we're up to 15 as we've had our reactors on for 1 segment so far, so that's automatically incrementing the power. And our heat will increment at the end of the turn after segment 8. So I have my order written, so I just go here, say, hey, I'm going to fire my beams, and advance on to the next step. Fire orders. So firing my beams, I'll make sure to spend the power first this time. It doesn't matter the order in which you do things, as long as you do them. Okay, on the dice tab, I'm going to add a spacer, and then I'll roll a d10. Our result is a 4. Going back to SSD, you can see why I put it down here at the bottom. Our result was from the latest D10 roll was a 4. So at range 3, cross-reference of 4 is 5 points of damage. Now, if there's 0 surface armor, the gumdrop does not get a soak roll. I'm going to bring this up again to record damage. So I have 5 points of damage. Move this over to here. And there's no surface armor. So first I say 5 to the bottom middle. And my opponent reply, no soak roll. They go, okay. They roll Allocation. They go 5 points to the 9, which is a beautiful hit. My opponent then rolls a soak roll. And he rolls, oh, you won't believe this. He rolls a 6. So he completely soaks the damage and marks nothing off. So he tells me, soak 6. And I go, that's it. That's the end. Anything less than 6, he would have marked off another SI and be a 50-50 chance of it blowing up. So now my cooldown is 3 segments from now. So that will be 3-5. And okay, can erase all this as well. So Mount A, gun number 1, 3-5 is the cooldown. So we'll advance out to 3-5 and see if we can finish up the gumdrop before we fly off into space and have to course correct to get back. Okay, currently we're at a good arc to shoot at the gumdrop because we're still on the bottom. However, because I flipped over, it is currently outside of my firing arc. That'll be course correcting to get back in. So I have to fly a couple more segments to get back into arc. Okay, we are now back in arc because our firing arc is all of the windows around the nose. So we see it right here. We're at range 4, which is still our best range. And we are off cooldown. So once again, we'll bring this up. Purple 1 to energy. Go here and say fire B weapons. So those are our orders. Well, that's for the weapons. We're still finishing up a pivot. And I think we can turn off our engines. And see what happens. Okay, as expected, yeah. Nothing's moved, so we're still there. So first thing, we're back up to full power as we spent 3 segments building it back up, so we're at full power. We actually lost, I refer to it as losing heat because we actually lost a point of power because we were actually full up last segment and we didn't fire, so we generated a point of power and then lost it because we only have 16 batteries. So all the paperwork's out of the way, just have to roll the dice. So as you might tell, I like rolling on the SSD page so I can reference everything at once. I'll just add a spacer there so you can tell where things will start. So I'll roll a d10. Hey, roll the 9. So again, that's 5 points. Oh, The other important thing is, as I am not hitting the bottom, I'll spend one flex point to shift the aim point to the bottom. And flex point usage is something you can look up in the rulebook. We didn't cover it earlier. But up here, my bridge gives me one flex point a segment. It's a use it or lose it situation, so might as well use it. So I did 5 points to the bottom where there's 0. So 5 points, I tell my opponents, 5 points, bottom middle. He'll respond by saying no soak roll as there's 0 armor. I'll bring up his ship sheet. So I can see what's going. We can see what's going on. I'll roll a d10 for location. I tell him location 5 points to location 6. He does a soak roll, and he soaked 6 again. Why can't I get these rolls in a regular game? So he goes soak 6. So then nothing happens. He doesn't mark off anything, and I go from 5 to -1. I'm like, done. That is pretty much it for this particular demo. They'll blow up the gumdrops, then start shooting at other ships. The procedures is exactly the same. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to set up this demo. Just like I did for demo number 1, it's basically exactly the same. So what you want to do is have 2 web browsers running for this. One for your opponent and one for you. So over here in the corner, go new incognito window, because that way no data is shared between the 2 windows. Go to the Ask Me website. In the incognito one. Select Attack Vector Tactical, Player, Create Game. Keep the map size as the default. This doesn't matter, red or blue. It just sets the initial orientation of the avid, that's all. It's more important for in-person games where you're doing a demo at a convention. Game name, from the drop-down list, select Demo 2. Click Next. Click New to get a game ID. I'm going to copy that, so I'll need to put it into the other web browser momentarily. Click Next. Sync mode, select Lead. Click Next. Team name, just leave it blank, and the erase button will erase it if there's something there already. Click Next. Then button Add Demo Ships. If it does not say Add Demo Ships, you didn't select demo number 2 from the dropdown. So add demo ships. It'll take a minute to load up over here, as it's downloading all the 3D models. And you can see all the different ships. Select the ship that you want to fly. In my case, it was purple. And then disown it. Because remember, this is the opponent's side. Once you've done that, hit the synchronization button. And it's all you need to do. Take this window and put it off to the side. Now, in your main window where you'll be playing the game, click Attack Vector Tactical, New Game, Player. This time, you're going to join the game. Again, this doesn't really matter. From the drop-down, Demo number 2, the game ID you just created in the other web browser, paste that in. Test the connection. Then load in the game. As you can see, everything's loading in. Just take a minute. Then select Next. Sync mode, Lead. Now, if you're going to have multiple people playing this, one person has to be lead. everyone else has to follow. But if you're going to do the solo, just select lead on both sides. Team name, again, leave blank. Then finally, go to the list page to claim your ship. Purple 1 is the one we wanted, so we go purple, I should say. So we go down to purple. Pretty sure I deselected purple. Yep. And then select owned by me, and just hit sync. And now this web browser will fly the purple ship, and the other web browser will fly all the other ships. Now, if you have other people playing, obviously you just go in disown red, orange, green, blue, black, etc., and have them claim it. And then just click this button here, go to the Avid page, arcs, turn, etc., and away you go. Well, this is the end of our second session in the Attack Vector Tactical tutorials. If you like this, please give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more stuff like this, or to be notified when part 3 is posted, please hit the subscribe button. And as always, comments, questions, etc., down in the comments section are always welcome, and I respond to all questions that are posted. Have a good day. I'll catch you all later.